Hey friends, Janky here, and welcome back to the lab. I hope that you guys are doing super well. I'm doing super well, and I'm super excited to be sharing this game with you. Today, we are talking about a new card-based RPG random adventure game known as Hand of Fate 2. Now, of course, before we get into talking about the game today, I will be talking about my experimental bias, so you guys know where I'm coming from while I'm telling you what I think of this game. First of all, I think that you should know I did buy this game myself. I did not get it for free, so this is coming from someone who, actually bought the game. Secondly, I should let you know that I only played a couple of campaigns in the game, so I didn't play the entire thing all the way through. It takes a while to get through, obviously, so I feel like I played enough to get a feel for the game, but just so you guys know where I'm coming from, I've just played a few campaigns of the game, so I may have missed some later game content that may change the playstyle or something like that. So just putting that out there. That is all my experimental bias. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because this game is sweet and I am very excited to tell you about it. So, of course, the first question to ask is, what is Hand of Fate 2? Well, as far as the Hand of Fate series goes, I can't really speak too much to the first game because I didn't play the original Hand of Fate, but I can tell you about the basic mechanics that come with Hand of Fate 2. So, basically, the story is that you are some sort of adventurer who has somehow ended up entangled with this magician who basically controls your life through cards. It's like he has taken all of your collective adventures and memories and turn them into cards that he then lays out on the table, and you sort of have an adventure. You recount all of your adventures through these cards that are randomly selected, so it's a little bit different every time. But it has a very D&D-esque quality, a very random dungeon, almost, I guess you could say, roguelike quality to it. And that every time you make a move, you flip over a new card. That card has some scenario on it that you have to react to. I think it's a really cool idea for a game, and I think it's cool that it kind of gives you a little variability in the story. There are certain elements that are sort of through lines that you can unlock through the game. Basically, whenever you pick up companions, you can kind of follow their stories as long as you complete certain sections and learn more about them and where they're going. And then, of course, also complete your own story arc through these random events, which I think is really cool. So, of course, we should also talk about the mechanics of the game. How does this game play? How does it work? Well, basically, I've kind of already explained it. It's card based, so every card has some sort of event or happening on it, and they're randomly selected from a deck of cards that you collect over your adventures. So the farther you adventure, the more cards you unlock. And then you pick those cards that you want to randomly appear. Now, each adventure also comes with its own cards that will randomly show up during the adventure. And so you have the cards that you picked along with the cards that the card master has picked. Now, the one thing I will say about this game is I kind of almost feel like you had to play the first game to really understand what was going on with this game, only because it seems more like the card master explains how this version of the game is different from the original game, as opposed to just telling you how this game works. There are a couple little tutorial things, things like explaining what enemies are and how they work, and how to engage in the fight mechanics. And it kind of gives you an explanation of the weird little mini games you do. Like there's a dice game that's very D&D-esque where you have to throw dice and meet a certain goal in order to win. There's also a card shuffle game, which really doesn't need that much explanation, but basically it's like you have chances of success and failure, and you get a certain amount of cards. They get shuffled up blindly so you can't see, and you have to randomly select one, and you're either failing or you have created success, and that works out for you. So it's one of those things where it relies a lot on RNG, which is cool. It definitely plays into that D&D quality, dungeon crawler quality of the game. I just think that maybe it could probably use a little better explanation-wise, especially when it comes to building the deck for each level. So you have certain cards that you're allowed to throw in, 5, usually 6. I think it varies depending on the level. But you can add in things like, this will give you more food if you stop here. This will give you more life if you stop here. There are weapons here that you can pick up. And you can choose the kind of weapons that you might encounter during your game. So of course you want to pick like high level weapons so that you're able to collect those as you go through the level. Like whenever you find a weapons dealer, you want to have those high weapon cards, those high level weapon cards in your deck so that you can use those high level weapons whenever you go into combat. And those are all things that you get to pick. I just think that it was pretty unclear at first, and there is like a helper to sort of help you pick things, but it's not really explained very well. It was easy to pick up on after a couple of levels. I just kind of wish that it would take you through it a bit more, just because it was a little confusing at first, and then after you get into it, you realize it's actually a pretty simple system. But just right off the bat, I think for new players, it would be a good idea to have some sort of explanation there. Now, while most of the game is based on moving across the game board, playing these RNG games, there are some elements that require you to get into combat situations. It is kind of cool how they have it set up. It's like whenever you get into a combat situation, you have all these cards like who's on your side, who's on the opposite side, what kind of weapons you have, all this stuff. And it kind of takes all of that and it creates an instance, a battle instance for you. And it's presented in the game as you being pulled into the card, which is sort of like you being pulled into your own memory, which is cool. Now, the one thing that's going on with combat is it's very Arkham style, I guess you could say. It's very, you press X to attack, there's a button that counters, there's a button that bashes, there's a button that evades, and you get prompts for all of those. So as long as you press the prompt in a timely manner, you're going to be good in combat. Now, I will say that I wasn't very good at it because I'm not particularly used to that style of play. I didn't really play like Shadow of Mordor or Arkham or any of those games that have that style of combat, so it was something that I had to get used to. And it's not something that I'm really a huge fan of personally, just because I much more enjoy sort of the RPG, JRPG style, where you have to like sort through your moves and figure out what's going to be effective in terms of strategy, as opposed to just straight up like mashing the X button and just going all out, just like going ham on attacking enemies. That being said, I think that the combat system works. I don't think it's super engaging, but I think it works for this game. I think that it makes the battles quick so you can get back to moving through the story, which I think is really the strength of this game, is moving through the story, encountering those events, figuring out what to do, making your choices. And so I think even though the combat feels pretty basic, it sort of plays into the larger game, which is just like a tabletop adventure game. Basically, that's what it is. As for other things going on with this game, I did notice some frame rate issues with the animations, and there were a couple times where the animations kind of take you out of the experience just because the enemies can behave in kind of a ragdoll way whenever they die, which whenever it's the final blow and they just like ragdoll glitch over to the side of the arena, that kind of takes away like the epicness of the fight. But other than that, I didn't notice a lot of issues running the game, which is good. I would just say that the main thing is just fixing those little bugs. And outside of that, I think that the game runs pretty smoothly. So what are some of my final thoughts about this game? Well, I think that it's a fun game. I think that it's sort of the kind of game that you would play and then take a break from for a while and then come back to eventually. I think that that's definitely the strength of Hand of Fate, is that it's a game where you can play a campaign, enjoy it, then leave the game, and then come back and play more campaigns later. I definitely don't think it's one that you're just going to sit and play all the time, but I do think it's definitely one of those games to come back to over time. So if you're looking for the type of game where you can just sort of play it, you have like an hour or so. Every campaign that I've played so far has run me about an hour. I would say maybe 2 hours max for the later campaigns. Not that I've gotten into them, but I would just assume based on leveling and stuff, that's probably how it would go. But it's definitely one of those games where you can play it for a round and then take a break. So I definitely think if you're looking for a game like that, Hand of Fate is definitely a good game for you. So with all of this in mind, what are my final thoughts? Well, let's bring out the Janky's Lab experimental scale. I would definitely say, like I said, this is a great game for someone who's looking for something to sort of play on the side and then come back to. If you're a big fan of RPG tabletops, which I am, this is definitely, again, a good game for you. So personally, I would give this game a ranking of promising results. I think that it did have a couple issues, just a couple little like glitching issues with frame rates and combat and stuff. Other than that, though, I think that it's a pretty good game. So if you're looking for just a cool little game to kind of come back to and play, I think that Hand of Fate is definitely a game for you. So that's my final thoughts. I think I'm going to consider this experiment concluded. Hope you guys agree. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave that like down below. Comments, positive or negative, feel free to leave those below as well. If you have thoughts on your Hand of Fate experience, of course, feel free to leave those below as well. More than anything, I hope you guys have a lovely day, evening, or whenever you have to be watching. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next time, this is Janky Shenanigans, signing out.